How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk, and back for another episode of Tier Talk. But this is going to be a good one, guys. I actually have on my guest today is the Correctional Officer Union President for Delaware Correctional Officers, and we're going to talk about the preliminary report that came out of from Delaware about the riot that occurred on February 1st, 2017, in which we lost one of our brave heroes. Now, I got a chance to meet Geoff Klopp, the union president, when I went down there. I believe. Hey, Jeff, when was that, Jeff?
That was back in March, wasn't it?
Yeah, around March, maybe the end of February, March, maybe a little after.
Yeah.
And we got a chance to make sure that, the family was able to get a lot of donations from a lot of love that the correctional officers or just people from corrections, people from the public just provided, and we were able to present it to the family. It just showed a lot of support, a lot of needed support, and it was great to actually meet some of those brave men and women in Delaware who walked the line. And again, thank you guys for having me, and also Jeff, thank you for coming back on the show again. It's our second show together.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me back, Anthony.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Again, so Jeff, just real quick, and again, we're going to talk about the preliminary report that got released by the independent investigators. I believe there were two judges, correct?
Yes. One was the former federal prosecutor, and the other one was a judge.
Right. So, first off, hey Jeff, just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience.
Yeah, my name's Geoff Klopp. I'm president of Correctional Officers Association of Delaware. I've been a correctional officer with the state of Delaware for 29 years. I've been the president of our union for 6 years.
And by the way, Jeff, I saw the love your people have for you. So obviously, and I also see a lot of articles that are being written. Anytime there's something going on that involve your front line, I do see your voice somewhere in those articles. So I find that to be, I just find that to be amazing. So thank you for representing those brave men and women so well and making sure that they get what they deserve.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, it's not easy to do, but it's important to do your homework if you're in union leadership and to establish relationships with the reporters and the media and to reach out to them. And once you get that going, it begins to cultivate itself, and you can turn it into a very, very positive thing to get the message out. And that's the whole problem across the country and in Delaware, is getting the message out.
Right, and it's good that you guys are doing that, because I feel at this point there's a lot of misinformation or just uninformed in regards to the public. The public may either be misinformed or they just don't have the information there. So it's good that the information does come from the front line and they can start seeing things in context, as opposed to the biased perspective that we usually get, which is usually one-sided and beneficial towards anything but the brave men and women who work in corrections. So it's good to be able to get that message out there. Now, for those that may not be familiar, February 1st, something tragic happened. We James T Vaughn Correctional Facility had a riot. Okay, about 19 hours later, we lost a hero. There's more detail. We covered the riot prior, but what I want to mention is that we lost a hero by the name of Lieutenant Floyd. Okay, so the riot is the result of what looks like to be a facility that may have been plagued with problems. And I remember having Jeff, we did the video together, which was a tribute to the brave hero that we lost, Lieutenant Floyd. And you mentioned that the riot could have been prevented, and I see some of the things in the preliminary report that kind of go along with what you say, that it could have been prevented. And most importantly, when I see prevention, I see communication. So do you think communication could have helped prevent this riot from occurring?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the frontline officers were doing their job, communicating properly to middle management. There was a breakdown, and I'll be interested to see where the breakdown was, but I'm assuming it was between middle management and upper management. I hope middle management was taking the communications up, but when this investigation is completed in August and the extensive review comes out of the incident, it will be crystal clear how preventable this thing was when you had 3 major disturbance codes that were called in the same building. There were multiple reports that were written that were able to give people an insight to the temperature in the building that were not overlooked by line staff. somehow, somewhere, it just was never acted upon, and I will be interested to see where that failure comes out in the communication system.
Now remember, not everyone here is from corrections. What do you mean by temperature?
Temperature. When I mean temperature, I mean is the feeling in the building. You know, the stress that a correctional officer, after being on the job for a while, you're able to feel it. You're able to feel the pressure changing. You're able to feel the inmates' attitudes change. It's a feeling, and it's something that you learn as a correctional officer.
And
It's very hard to describe.
no, I understand. Working in the field, you just have you have a feeling, but that's based on experience and knowledge. And now, when we're talking about communication, we're talking about top down and bottom up. Of course, we're talking about open communication both ways. You know, you want to have the frontline staff have that availability to talk to administrative staff, as well as communication being passed down. So, I mean, that's how I believe administrative staff knows that there's concerns. They know that there's concerns because it comes from people who are there directly on the front line, who work in these areas every day, and they're able to take note of what these concerns are. So when we talk about communication, we're talking about concerns that, at least when you read through the report, that it was concerns that frontline may have brought up that may have been or seems to have been ignored. So if that's the case, what concerns were brought up that we feel were not entertained when they should have been?
Oh, well, those concerns were the fact that the inmates, had major disturbances and major complaints that were overlooked and unheard, and staff had issues with different classifications of inmates, and I mean, just all the classic signs will be identified in the final report.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about. Oh, hold on, I got a plane overhead. Just bear with me here. I'm doing it outside because it's nice out. Usually I do it inside a studio, but it's nice out right now, and I want to enjoy the weather. The weather in Jersey sometimes just sucks. Okay, so basically, when we're talking about communication, and as you said, when we're talking about classification, I read the preliminary report now. Classification, guys, just again to get the audience familiar, classification is an objective process that basically makes sure that we put the right inmates in the right areas. And we base it on many things, criminal history, institutional behavior, the amount of time they may have in could be an effect, and they're separated in different statuses, everything from extreme close, like in what some states may say max, to full min, and obviously release. So what we try not to do is you don't want to mix statuses. You don't want to have inmates in higher level status in lower level areas. So when I read the report and they talked about there were some classification issues, were there inmates that were grouped together that by classification status shouldn't have been?
Yes, and there was gang intelligence that that certain inmates should not have been on the same tier, let alone in the same cell and across cells from one another. And all this was brought about by the ACLU agreement because we were forced. We weren't forced, but they made the poor decision of classifying inmates to a lower security status in order to enable the ACLU agreement to have housing space for the inmates to implement the ACLU agreement. So once again, it's government trying to tell correctional officers how to do their job when we know how to do our job. And the fact that people that never come in a facility think that they know how to manage these inmates continues to be absurd to me. I understand psychiatric issues and things of that nature, but we are dealing with people that nobody else wants to deal with. And the fact of the matter is we know what we're doing. We give them opportunities, ones that have the ability to do right and to do better. We give them those opportunities. The ones that are locked down for 23 hours a day are locked down for 23 hours for a reason. And, it's the classification was not followed properly, and that was the main issue.
Well, I always mention, classification, again, just to the audience out there, classification to some extent is the backbone because it provides the environment in which the officers have to maintain control, yes, but the officers do rely on classification to make sure the inmates are in the right areas, and then the officers will go ahead and maintain control of those areas based on where those inmates have been placed. Now, again, that's just filling it out, just a little knowledge here. So if you have inmates that aren't supposed to be there, it makes it a lot harder for officers to maintain control. And again, they're trusting the objective process to make sure that those inmates are where they're supposed to be. But again, if they're not and situations occur, officers are going to wind up getting harmed trying to prevent what probably could have been prevented with a little bit more research before you put them into the unit. And again, that's the objective classification process. But you also mentioned something about gangs, and we talked about this prior on one of my shows, and I actually did a quick little dialogue. Gang intel is very important for an officer. We know that, and the thing is, and the reason why I always think it's very important, I know some people want to kind of hold on to the gang knowledge for whatever reason. Most of the time it's power and pride. But having said that, identifying and knowing who's who in the unit is very important for the officer because the officer has to navigate his way through that unit or her way through that unit every day. If the officer does not have the intel, and again, simple intel, identifying gang members, just things that can help them know what set this inmate belongs to, they're able to control the population in a way that's safe for them, safe for other inmates, safe for the facility at whole. Now, there are some that harbor that information, that protect it for whatever reason, but I got to mention something on this, though. The inmates in that unit, they G-check every inmate that goes in there. So they know who's who. They know what set they're repping. They know what those inmates are about. So if you're not telling the officer anything about those inmates, you're putting the officer in a very big disadvantage. And in today's world, because there's so many gangs and rivalries and we try to keep the peace, there could be a time where one unit may be overwhelmed with one group, one set, and that officer now with no knowledge of what's going on doesn't know, do I have a problem with this one guy or do I have a problem with many? Because now the inmates would be united based on whatever their gang culture would be. So not giving the officer knowledge, you're not helping the officer manage an approach, manage in a way to protect themselves, or kind of a way to maneuver, moving inmates around, doing some internal management. Because I got to ask you a question, Geoff, but I do got one more thought if I want. I think it's an important thought, is that when we're dealing with gangs, we know that sometimes, I think Frontline knows they're impossible situations, okay? You can't house rival gang members together, and you may have units that may be overwhelmed with one gang. We know, or one set. We know that can happen. We know that can happen. But if you're not telling the officer, you're not giving the officer a chance to manage that population, which could make an impossible situation somewhat possible. And when you don't tell that officer, and the officer has no idea what's being put in their unit, now it becomes an impossible situation. I mean, is that what was going on a little bit, Geoff?
Yeah, that was absolutely what was going on. Is you were not giving the officers the proper knowledge. And the classifications were done improperly. In fact, no, there was no information sharing. There was no communication. It was broken. I mean, that's what happens when you have people working as much overtime as they were working.
And that's something I want to talk on after you're done. We got to talk about that. That's an area that they mentioned. You hit it right spot on, Geoff. You hit it right spot on. Let's talk about the overtime now. Now, let me ask you a question: quality versus quantity. I mean, when a facility is desperate for manpower, when they're desperate to hire, do we lose quality and we just kind of take quantity?
We lost. Yes, we've lost quality for the most part. I mean, we still have a lot of good officers, but now there's some folks that they're struggling to keep up to speed. But the big problem is when you work the amount of overtime, when you're using 50% of your shift strength is overtime, and people are working overtime of 24 to 40 hours a week on a regular basis.
It's too much.
It's physically and mentally impossible to do your job properly. People don't understand the mental stress that comes with being a correctional officer and dealing with these inmates for 8 hours a day, 16 hours a day for the amount of time that these guys at Vaughn have been forced to suffer with with an unsafe working environment due to lack of staff. Period.
Hey, Geoff, let me ask you another perspective related to bodies that are overworked and tired. Let's say you have to work with that person that's on 16 hours for his fourth or fifth day, or for her fourth and fifth day in a row. Can you really trust your life in that person's hands?
It's difficult, and you're carrying more of the weight, and absolutely, it's hard. It's hard on all fronts. It's hard on the guy working the overtime trying to keep up, and then the folks that aren't working the overtime. You're trying to do more for the officer that's working the overtime because they're tired. And it's like a domino effect.
Well, also when we talk about overtime, we're also talking about the reason why there's so much overtime is because the facility is understaffed and they're not getting the incentive to maintain or invite, get new employees in. So when we talk about incentives, I know you guys mentioned it, the incentives have to be real. You're talking about people that you want to have that are qualified to work in a law enforcement position. So my thing is this: if the incentives aren't good and you still got people that are taking this job, even though the incentives are poor, and you can get better incentives, let's say at a Walmart, doesn't that make you question the people that are working next to you as to why would you have to take this job when, shoot, you couldn't even get hired at Walmart? Who are you really putting next to me?
Well, absolutely. They have reduced the qualifications where, you start to wonder.
Well, doesn't that make you feel that that's a total disrespect to the frontline warriors who walk that line? Because you should exhaust everything when it comes to putting somebody next to somebody.
Yes, and a lot of the people, they come in and they give it their all, the best of their ability, regardless. But when you get in certain situations, you have to take a look at who you have around you and what you're able to effectively do with the staff that you are working with that day.
Well, see, my concern always been, again, working where I work, is that you got to hire qualified people, which means that you have to give better incentives because of the work that they're doing. Because as you get in corrections, you can't just have Joe Schmo. You got to have somebody that's qualified because of the world you're going to be working in, the role that you're going to be playing. You're working in a world that can be very manipulative, very dangerous, in so many ways. So if you don't have the right qualified person for the job, on an immediate level, that person's vulnerable. On a wider level, the individual next to him, the facility as a whole, the public, based on that one individual who may not be qualified. But again, the department's hiring out of desperation because, again, the incentive to work or the incentive to maintain isn't there. That's why I got to agree with the preliminary findings, and also with what you've always kicked back, is you got to have the proper incentive because it invites the qualified people. And when you did the proper incentive and you say that you care enough to go this route to get the right people, then the person that's got to work next to him is going to have a little bit more faith in the system because they're going to see that the person next to them is qualified. Because I'm going to tell you something, and Geoff, I know you got to agree with this. When you work at a facility, let's say that's understaffed, right, or have people that really the incentive's not there, so maybe people that you're just hiring out of desperation. Again, understaffed or people that you're hiring out of desperation, I would be concerned if I was an officer, a good officer, and I'm looking to address, let's say, some type of issue with an inmate, like contraband or something like that. I may be concerned because I'm going to be worried, okay, if the facility's understaffed and I address this inmate and he acts out, does somebody got my back? Probably not, because there's not enough manpower for that. Or this guy they hired, I just don't know this guy. This guy's a little shady to me. If I approach this inmate because he has this contraband, is this person going to have my back? That's why I always mentioned, besides the quality aspect of things, where are the mandated team? Just one team. That's all. I think every facility should always have one team on standby. I don't care if that team does nothing for years. That team is a deterrent. That team will provide confidence with staff, because staff will know I'll give my order because I know I got a team that's got my back. It gives confidence to the supervisor because the supervisor doesn't have to scramble to get to a team. He knows that there's going to be a team that's going to respond, which means guess what they can do? They can attend to the location in distress a lot quicker, evaluate it, and not go in blindly because they're trying to scramble to get a team, and they're also not pulling from units and leaving other areas unoccupied. That's why in every facility you need a mandated team. And also, and I noticed they mentioned this in the preliminary report, Geoff, a little bit, and I know you said this may have not been 100%, and I want to ask you about that. There was a relationship with the officers and the special unit teams.
Oh, they were referring to our correctional emergency response team. Yeah, I've asked some questions about that, and I'm trying to get more information on it. I really don't have a whole lot of information on that to comment. But I saw that, and I've like I said, I just got the report the other day, but that definitely caught my attention, and I'll be curious to see. But the other thing too, Anthony, you talk about quality of staff, but at the end of the day, it's also about quality of training. It's about morale, because you can take somebody and build them up just as easy as you can tear them down by working them to death. I mean, it's the staff shortage that creates the toxic, cancerous environment, because you don't get the right training, you don't get enough training, you don't get enough vacation time, you don't get the tools and the help that you need. I mean, you can take people and mold them. When you give them the right tools and you give them the right training, you can bring them up. But as you allow things to slowly to deteriorate over time, even your best officers will be brought down a notch, because you just don't think anybody cares about you. You don't think what you're doing makes a difference, because they don't even care enough to give you enough help to staff the building properly.
And you know what, Geoff? You're 100% correct. Priority is the training. It's good that we mentioned that, because now we're covering all avenues, and definitely that perspective is 100% correct. You're right. You can definitely, if you invest in enough time, you get the training going, the needed training, you're right. You can build a foundation where someone can work off of, and they can be truly great at what they do. But again, when you don't have the training available, when the training's not there, then you're stuck with that original person who may not have made any changes. So I definitely could see to your point, but I believe that we do have a middle ground in regards to, ultimately we want quality, but 100% in agreement with what you're saying about training. And I noticed that was mentioned too, training and equipment. When it comes to training, I mean, what kind of academy are you getting? What type of equipment are you being given? What are you being trained on?
No, that's part of the problem. I mean, the whole process is broken. From the salary all the way down to the academy. I mean, everything is so antiquated. I mean, again, we still have guys carrying 38 caliber revolver weapons, and they can't even hardly find ammunition for the doggone things because they're so daggum antique. The whole department as a whole. The training, the modules haven't been changed probably in 25 years. I mean, there's been new stuff that's been added, but I'm quite sure the initial stuff needs a tremendous update.
Well, you know what? I want to mention, just for management who doesn't invest in training, you got to realize something. The more you train your individuals, just from a management perspective, the more you can hold them liable. And again, I don't mean to be an ass about this, but just hear me out. Just from a management perspective, you invest into your people, obviously for the right reason. Don't get me wrong. Training will save lives. I know that. But just from a management perspective and where you're thinking about money, well, think about the long run. Don't think about what's immediately in front of you. Think about it in the long run. You provide the proper training. Again, corrections has evolved. It's a lot different than just locking people up and throwing away the key. We're trying to make things work. We're actually making rehabilitation work in buildings that were not meant for that. So there's a lot of things that a lot of discretion custody has to obviously hold on, I got some cars walking by here, hold on a second. A lot of discretion that custody has got to adapt and adjust to. They got to figure it out, because again, you're putting these programs at the facilities that weren't built for that. But having said that, you got to have these officers properly trained, because from a management perspective, if I train them and they mess up, I can hold them liable. Now, again, that's not the only reason why we're training them, but again, it's a perspective that's not usually out there, because everybody's worried about how much money can I save today, because that person who's a politician is only involved in today. But the thing is, we need consistency. The officers, they don't work just for a few years, they work for 25 years. That means there's got to be some consistency for them across the field. 25 years that they're going to be in one profession, they have to see consistency. And what sucks for them is every few years leadership changes, consistency changes, and they wind up, just going back and forth, not knowing which way they got to go. They don't know which way, they don't know what to do. So having said that, when we get leaders that stop thinking about today and start thinking about tomorrow, then you're going to see that training is beneficial, because training is worried about that potential lawsuit that may not happen on your watch, but can happen down the line. You know what I mean? And the reason why I'm posing this perspective about training is because people only care about money nowadays. They only care about money being saved, when I know training is a lot more than that. Training is about building that instant reaction that's going to help save lives. But if anybody wants to take the money perspective, there's my argument on that too. The liability of everything. If I train you on how to save an inmate's life, or how to maintain a crime scene, if something happens, the department could say, wait a second, they were trained on it. And you could put and again, I'm not looking to put pressure on the individual. I'm just saying, can we get some training out for these guys? They need training. But on the flip side, to speak on behalf of the front line, you're not training them. Don't think about holding them responsible when they don't do something correct that they haven't been trained for. Training is important. All types of training, including cross-perspective training. Great point by Geoff. It's just it's an amazing point. It's overlooked all the time, but it's training that's going to save lives, and it's training that's going to bring qualified people back into the system. It's going to bring the right people for the right job, or it's going to create the right people for the right job, as Geoff said. It's going to create, let me quote Geoff here real quick, because he said something that was very on point. It's going to create training. Training is going to create the right person for the job. You eliminate training, you're eliminating the chance for the right person to be next to me, who's going to protect my life. Hey, Geoff, I know you said you only had 20 minutes. Is there anything else you want to say? I know you're busy.
I'm good, Anthony. I appreciate it. Hey, give me a call back here in a couple weeks. Let's do this again.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping I can get you for about an hour. Is that all right?
Yep, we'll make it happen next time. I've got a family engagement I got to run to, but I really appreciate it.
I'd like to do it in person with you, if that's okay, but take care of your family, and I'll talk to you later on.
All right, take care.
Take care of yourself. Be safe, brother. All right, guys, so I just wanted to do the show real quick. Preliminary reports are out. I have to cover it. You got to cover it. I did it by myself, but I had a chance. Geoff Klopp's a good friend of mine, union president. Why not go to him, right? Why am I going to make it up? I don't walk that unit. I don't work in Delaware, so I give my own personal opinion, and then I went ahead and had him on the show. These are things that are addressed. They're not out there in the public light. Here, there's some information for you, public. Here you go. Take the information. Do with what you want with it. But you take the information so you can no longer say you did not know. That's the key. You can't say you did not know. And that's why we do things like this. The report's out. Are other states reading these reports? Are you listening? Because remember, this is the outcome of what's probably happening at your facility right now. This is the outcome of problems that are plaguing your facility. So let's read these things. Let's learn. Let's bring some consistency back, because what happens in Delaware can happen anywhere else. What are we doing? And guys, by the way, Friday, so what's Friday? June 9th, 2017, we're doing that ACA event. It's a great event, guys. We're going to talk about hate crimes, active shooters. It's out at Seton Hall University. Registration's about $35. If you're interested, again, it's a great event. I don't know if it's too late to register, but if you know people, they can always probably try to get you in. But again, you want to hit up the ACA page on Facebook. It's the New Jersey ACA chapter. Please like the page too. It's the American Correctional Association. I sit on the board. It's a great board, very, very proactive with the front line, really trying to get what you guys want out there. So hit up that page, NJACA, like that page, and let's get your perspective, because they want to bring what you guys want, because they want to invite you guys. And guys, listen to this. Do your research. See when these things are happening, and go, because they're there, guys. Training is there. You got to try to go. I know we only want to talk about work for so long, but it doesn't hurt to always educate ourselves, because you never know when that's going to come into use to save your life or somebody else's. So again, the show is Tear Talk. Like the page, guys. Like the YouTube page. Subscribe to the channel. Okay, help me, like, comment, do whatever you got to do. Let's get this channel blown up. Subscribe, share, do whatever you got to do. Also, like the page on Facebook and download the app. As always, guys, it's a pleasure. My name is Anthony Gangi, and I'll talk to you soon. Show us territory.